everyone, welcome to the Happy Teacher Pod. Today you will notice we've got our first guest speaker, which we're very excited about. Hello. So this is Emma. Emma is the founding director of MTPT Project, so that's Maternity Teacher, Paternity Teacher Project. It's the UK's only parent-teach charity. I've got the honour of being the very recent policy officer for this charity as well, so it's very close to my heart. It provides, Emma will tell you a lot more, but it provides support for pregnant and expectant staff. It provides coaching during parental leave, return to work workshops, and they are kind of at the forefront for how to create life-friendly schools. So hopefully, Emma, I've done that somewhat of a justice, and then you can obviously make it all better and tell us all a little bit more. But yeah, so that's what the charity is, and we're very excited to be hearing from Emma.
Yeah. Do yourself down a little bit, Jenny. You are the policy officer now, but you were the Kent rep for a very, very long time and chapter author for our book. So you've been around for ages with us.
Thanks, getting on a bit.
Yeah, we love it. The authors are in the building as well. Love that. Love that for both of you. So we usually do a break-time banter slot right at the beginning, and before the podcast we asked Emma to try and think of because Emma, you were a teacher for how long?
12 years, yeah.
For 12 years, so she definitely has some stories, I am sure. So we asked her to think of something, a funny story from her time in teaching, so I'll pass over to Emma.
Quite a sweet one that I thought of, and Jenny said, if it links to the episode, then that's great. And obviously, being the MTPT Project founder, I'm the baby lady when it comes to education. And in my former school, my most recent school, I did take 2 periods of leave. And when I first joined the school, it was sort of 2 years into academy handover. So we were in that sort of challenging. Some of the year groups remembered the previous school and the previous uniform, and they didn't like any of the teachers, and then we were trying to get the new branding in, essentially the new culture and ethos of the school. And so it was a fun place to be at that time, and lots of positive challenges and lots of challenges. And I had
positive spin on that.
I had a year. The year 9, they came to me in year 9. They were with my trainee in year 8, and they came to me. Is that true? No, they were with me in year 9. They went to my trainee in year 10. And one of the boys, let's call him George, not his name, but he and I had a very, very fractious relationship, really, really difficult. Lots of sort of parents coming in, pointing the finger directly at me for all the problems, lots of sort of rubbing each other up the wrong way, and we didn't really seem to be able to find a way past it. And when I was pregnant with my son, the school was still very challenging, and there were sort of moments in the classroom where, despite being heavily pregnant, nobody cared in the classroom in that particular class, and it was quite a stressful period with that particular group, and he made my life miserable. When just before I went on leave, a couple of the boys in that class were asking me, what are you going to call the baby, because they knew it was a boy. And I jokingly said, yeah, I'm going to call it George. I think at that point I was just so sort of, my sense of humour was so dry because I was so over that class that I was just happy to be ridiculous. And, he was like, that's ridiculous. You're not going to call it George. Why are you saying that this? And I got really sort of like suspicious and I was like, no, George is one of our top names for our son. And then I went on leave, came back again for a couple of kit days and saw him, and he was so happy to see me. Obviously, absence does make the heart grow fonder, that it was almost creepy. And I brought my son in for the kit day, and he said, "Oh, is that your baby? What's his name?" And I was like, "George." We called him George, and he was like, "No, you didn't." And I was like, No, I was serious the whole time. This is baby George. And so all the teachers sort of around me played along with it. And they're like, yeah, isn't he cute, baby George? And the kids just weren't quite sure whether I was joking or not. And had I really called this baby after, called him the same name. And for a little while, every time he saw me, he was like, it's not really baby George. And I was like, yeah. Baby George, it's my favourite name. And eventually he knew that my son was called Hugo, but I would continue to refer whenever I was in front of him to baby George until he was in year 11. It did wonders for our relationship. I don't know, maybe he just didn't think I had a sense of humour before that, and that showed him the slightly weird side that we both had. And I think he left year 11 being, Miss Sheppard. She was best teacher ever, best English teacher, best teacher in the whole school, maybe the world, and so why wouldn't I name my son after what became my biggest fan?
Isn't that like often the teacher dilemma anyway, of the like what to call your children? And like, you can't call them a name. I know that, sorry, this is a bit off topic, but you can't call them a name where you've had a child that's like really naughty at school that's got that same name. So like for me, like our second, we called her Evie, and me and my husband both had taught an Evie, just one in our whole like teaching career, and we were like, oh, she was like the loveliest ever, like, it's fine, Evie's a good name. And then I went to my new school, and God, there was a vile Evie in the year group, and I was just like, oh no. I was like, what have we done? We've now like given her a name that like I'm now teaching this child, and she ended up having like managed move and everything, and I was like, oh my God, like I've called my child this name. Yeah, it's one of those.
Crystal ball.
Jenny, what did you name your child after? The caretaker, so obviously of our old school.
Not just that. I obviously put a lot of research into everything that I do, but so yeah, my eldest child's called Ted. And yeah, one of the caretaker that Roxy and I worked with was called Ted. And I remember telling him, because I left that school when I was quite heavily pregnant, you're one of the reasons I've called my child Ted, because I think you're pretty awesome. Because I just think he just gave me so much wisdom. He was just this amazing guy. It's amazing. And I remember thinking, if my unborn child becomes like 55-year-old Ted or whatever age he was, I've no idea. I was like, I'll be a happy woman.
Oh, that's so nice.
I love that story, Emma. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So today we've got, Jenny has come up with 4 questions for you, because obviously we wanted to ask you about being a happy teacher, but within kind of like parental role. Now, we're all parents, but there will be obviously teachers that are not parents that, will become parents, and they kind of have these questions that they don't really have the answers to. And actually, even thinking back to having my children, I wish I'd had more support on that side of things, of like teachers that had children, and like the kind of flexible working. I mean, we've spoken about this already, Jenny, like I'd love to have flexible working, but I've never felt like it's possible. And Jenny's always like been the advocate, I mean, for years now, since I've known her, for having, what did you say, like a life, what do you call it?
Oh, it's Emma's terminology, but like life-friendly schools.
Yeah, life-friendly school. Like, I love that, life-friendly school, which I don't necessarily feel is always the case, unfortunately, in teaching. So, Jenny, did you want to start off with the first question?
Well, yeah, but what I was going to say, I think I totally forgot in the beginning of the episode to say what the episode was called, which would make sense for why we've. I was just so excited to have Emma, I forgot to say what the episode's called. So this episode is meant to be entitled, it'll be in the show notes, it'll be in the headers, but how do life-friendly schools lead to happy teachers? So each episode, we've got happy teachers in the title. It's all, very much teachers with a scheme of work, our overarching focus. But yeah, how do life-friendly schools lead to happy teachers? So with that in mind, my first question was thinking about anyone that's applying for a new role in a new school, say, what advice would you give him or her to ascertain whether this prospective new school is life-friendly?
Yeah, I think you can get a lot from stepping foot in a school and having a tour, and a lot of schools are really happy sort of pre-application to meet potential applicants, to give them a tour round, to chat to them, to answer any of their questions. Schools that potentially aren't happy to do that, that's already a red flag. And that might be because they're, brilliant schools, but frankly run ragged, don't have the capacity, or there might be health and safety reasons that might make them hesitant to have people on site that don't need to be on site. So that can give you a sort of flavour already about the openness of the school and transparency and what they're willing to show you. And obviously, once you can see during the school day, if you can do a visit during the school day, and you can see what that school is like, through not after school hours or not on an open evening, then it gives you a pretty good idea of what type of school that you're stepping into. If staff look happy, if learning looks purposeful, and I mean all the good things that you would look for in just an effective school environment. But more than that, you can have a look at things like demographics, like how old are the staff that are working there, in different positions of leadership, who are you seeing at different points. You can drop a couple of comments, if you want to, about, oh, my son just goes to school just down the road, see if that opens up any interesting conversations. If you want to sort of probe a little bit there, you can ask questions about leadership, about working patterns. Do you have any staff who work part-time or flexibly, or do you have staff that have their own families? How does that work in terms of their workload and their balance? How would you say that your staff fare? Because obviously you're not employed by them yet, you're not at interview stage, so that's really sort of everybody's cards are on the table to have that conversation. And then once you've had that half an hour window with whoever it is that is designated to walk you around, you can make your decisions about whether the vibe was good or not.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think asking those questions on a more casual level when you're kind of like viewing the school sometimes is easier than when you're at interview level and it's kind of like pressured and you don't feel like maybe you can kind of ask those types of things. So I definitely feel like on a school viewing, that would be the best place to kind of try and gather. Does a lot of.
That reminds me when I was looking at schools, actually. So I did a kind of information gather thing, and I took it to the next level. So I not out of choice, but I just couldn't get childcare for my 3-year-old, and my 3-year-old was exclusively wearing what was he wearing? Spider-Man swimsuits in the day. So I went round the school with a 3-year-old dressed in a Spider-Man swimsuit and flip-flops, because that's all he would wear. And they were great. So yeah, I was quite willing to put an application there. I was like, you get it.
Is that where you got your job?
It's not my current job, but it is a school that I did look around and I was very happy with.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a massive difference. That
the problem is, I'm just thinking about the practicalities of what I'm saying. I imagine, Jenny, that you were able to do that because you were already working part-time or flexibly somehow that gave you that ability to go during the working day. So for colleagues who are already working full-time, that's more problematic. But if you network locally, and there are lots of networks like Women Ed, like the MTPT project, we have local networks, that subject-specific networks. You often hear about the school and you hear either positive reputations or negative reputations, and once you start having those conversations, you see who is already happy and who is sort of trying to escape their school.
So I mean, this kind of like brings it back more into like when you're actually at the school. But our second question was, what advice would you give to anyone listening that is thinking of starting a family? So like when you're already at a school, you're thinking about starting a family, like what kind of advice would you give them in terms of doing that?
I think to be really, really frank from the get-go, there are real differences in gendered approaches to family planning. So a lot of women tend to get their ducks in a row or start to think about what that plan's going to look like far earlier than men. I mean, if we want to be really crass, which it's not the case, but we have a lot of jokes about men realizing that they're going to become fathers once the baby arrives, and expectant mums sort of doing all that preparation. And the research does suggest that women leave before they leave. So they start putting limits on their occupational mobility or their progression because they think that it might not necessarily be compatible with a child at some point in the future, even if that child isn't even, thought of yet. So my first encouragement would be that a baby is going to fall into whatever life you provide for them. And if you are happy and fulfilled professionally and personally in that life, then baby is going to be happy and fulfilled. If you are feeling resentful or bored, or as if you're not being challenged sufficiently, or as if you've let opportunities pass you by for whatever reason, and partly maybe because you thought, oh, I can't be X and a mum, or I can't be Y and a mum, or if I'm a mum I won't be able to, then that resentment is going to last a lot longer and sort of stew. So just really encourage women in particular to take the professional opportunities that appeal to them, and be safe in the knowledge that baby will come when baby comes, if baby comes. But also for expectant fathers and non-birthing partners, just the idea that parenting can be equal, and a lot of our unequal traditional models can be challenged, and there are options of starting from the get-go as an equal partnership if you are in a partnership, when you're starting a family or thinking of starting a family, and not necessarily resigning yourself to the fact that you'll get 2 weeks paternity leave and then have to go back and be the breadwinner. Actually, there can be a different way, and if you have a vision of what you want family life to look like, then do the research and make it happen in the way that you want it to.
I'd wish I'd known these things when I was going on maternity leave, because I definitely went down the very traditional kind of, I took a year, I came back, I was full time. My husband took 2 weeks, like literally we just started, like, not necessarily because we wanted to do it like that, just because we didn't really know any different, didn't even know that something different could exist. I did see with Jenny that obviously she took a different kind of route completely, which I think quite nicely leads on to our third question. But Jenny, did you want to, because obviously this links to kind of your more about your experience of being
so I did shared parental leave, so I had some time at the beginning, and then my husband had some of the time. It also meant that I kind of went back during the holidays and managed to kind of obviously get a bit more time off with my second maternity leave as well. But so I guess what I was thinking about was shared parental leave, so thinking about both people in the relationship here. And I was thinking many of our listeners, might be currently on shared parental leave, maybe struggling with the change of pace, maybe worried about their return to work. So I was just wondering what advice you have for those people, whether male or female or.
I think talking is great. Reaching out and actually articulating your feelings or your emotions with colleagues, with family members, with friends, with the MGPT Project Network. We're really, really friendly, and just saying I'm feeling this way. And I think you will, if you voice it, you will find people who are feeling the same, or have had the same experience, and have come out the other end, or have taken certain decisions about that. Because you can do your leave your way. There's no rule book dictating what you have to do on your leave, how high paced or low paced your leave needs to be. The deciding factor will be your body, particularly your potentially sleep deprived body, and your baby's physical and emotional needs. Definitely. As long as those things are met, then we've had colleagues who have absolutely loved their leave doing PhDs. We've had colleagues who have got to the end of a year and then thought, oh yeah, going back to work, better think about that now, because they've enjoyed just completely being away from their professional identity. So whatever works for you, do it. And if you're sort of in a bit of a conflictual state or an unsure state, voice it, talk about it, ask people, and find somebody who will listen. I think one of the most upsetting things for me when I started the project was that what I wanted to do with my leave. So I wanted to keep my brain active. I really like structure. I find life without structure really hard on my mental health. Actually, that's the raw deal of it. I really like learning. I really like going to exciting places and meeting people and seeing things. And I found that the narrative around motherhood was incredibly restrictive and limiting. When I was voicing things like, I'd really like to sort of research this attrition figure with women aged 30 to 39, I was being told, you don't have time for research, or, why aren't you looking after your baby, or, what are you doing it wrong? And I felt strange. I felt like a weirdo. I felt like a freak. And actually, it wasn't until, and it was a horrible feeling, like maybe I'm doing a bad job of this whole mother thing because I want my brain to still be active in the way that I am used to having my brain active. And it wasn't until I found other people who were doing similar things that I was like, oh, there are others like me in the world. I'm not strange. I'm not a completely isolated case. I'm not a bad mum, actually.
Did you find that anyone in your school that you were in had done what you wanted to do before you? Because I think for me, listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But actually, I think if I think back, the position that I was in is there were not many staff in my school that had actually had children at all. Like none of the SLT had children. And so for me, it was like I'd never seen it before. So in my head, it was like, nope, you standardly take this amount of time. My husband gets this amount of paternity leave, and that's that kind of thing. So did you find that you got those ideas from someone else that you'd seen it from, or you just wanted it that way, and so you kind of researched it yourself?
So actually, role modelling is still a real issue for our whole community, and that was definitely the case with me. As I mentioned, it was like recently taken over as an academy.
Yeah.
So quite a young staff base, or a sort of inherited staff base that were then having second thoughts about staying and therefore moving on. So lots of turnover. At the time, it became really stable by the time I left. But the fact is, change is hard on schools, and it is hard on staffing. So when I was there were two colleagues who were about to come back. There was a colleague who was off. There were sort of two middle leader colleagues that were off, and there was teaching colleagues that were just about to come back. I was only in the school about a year before I went on leave. So I joined in January, which was a weird time to join anyway. But it just meant that we were sort of crossing each other, not having the chance to share experiences, not knowing each other well enough to have that bonding conversation. And by the time I came back from leave, of sort of 4 staff members who had potentially sort of overlapped, I was one of 2 who stayed, and the other colleague who stayed, she dropped to part-time and was very much in a mindset that her logistics, her context, she was travelling a very long way, and her husband was a pilot, worked away. She was finding it really, really, really hard work. So no, I was one of the first parents to stay longer term. I think is probably the overview of that.
It's period. So sad, because I've got so many examples of friends that have either been kind of pushed out of certain roles because they've gone down to part-time, or haven't been able to go part-time because they've asked the school, and the school have just blanket said no, like not even tried to kind of negotiate or give some kind of flexibility at all. And so it's actually quite sad, because obviously we have children and we're still teachers. We still, like you said before, like I still want to use my brain, like I still want to be a teacher and like kind of do those types of things and be an intellectual at the same time as being a mother, like, and dedicating my time to being a mother. And I think it's really hard to get that balance. And I think it probably leads really nicely into our last question, which is, what is your advice to institutions to make them these life-friendly schools? Because we've worked at multiple different schools, and I would say that the school I'm currently at is pretty life friendly. Like I actually feel quite comfortable. Like if I felt, I wanted to go and ask for part-time, I don't think that they would like poo-poo the idea and be like, absolutely not, which in my old school would have been the case. But yeah, what's your advice to institutions to try and make them more life friendly, especially for parents, of course?
I think essentially, because of the way schools work, flexibility is really, really important, and including in that the option of part-time, but flexibility in terms of creative ways of doing flexibility, like late starts, early finishes, working from home days, compressed days. There's all sorts of ways to make a timetable work flexibly. And just as a shout out, there's a whole programme called the Flexible Working Ambassador Schools and Mats that's DFE funded, that's supporting schools to do that. So if flexibility is sort of top on your agenda, Google flexible working in education. But I think a question for senior leaders is, if staff can't do their job between the hours of a typical working day, and I know we start earlier, so let's say 8 until 5, then the school is not life friendly, because the fact is that, and this is part of the reason we use life friendly rather than family friendly, is that if you have any sort of caring responsibilities, when you are in the building, you are working, or when you are having your work from home day, you are working, and you're child free in order to focus your energies on work. The minute you go home, you are taking on another job, you're taking on another role, which means you often physically cannot be doing anything to do work. But why do we need to get to the point where we have something very concrete, i.e. a baby or a child, that's preventing us from working until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, all the way through the weekends, Saturdays, when actually our colleagues who are child-free by choice or otherwise, or don't yet have families, they might do in the future, they should be able to finish their working day and go and have a drink with their friends, go to the gym, look after their own mental health, have a puppy, because we're not paid to work 24 hours a day, and two, we're also not contracted in a way that some industries, I mean, I'm thinking of the military, I'm thinking of the police, I'm thinking of the firefighters, are contracted to understand that there may be, days when they have to work full 12-hour shifts for the safety of the people that they look after. So if there's anything stopping your school from requiring your staff to work from point X to point Y, a reasonable working day, then address those factors. And that might be things like workload, it might be things like behaviour, it might be things like lack of part-time or flexibility within the school day. It's my first sort of advice. And then the second is review all of your policies. And because a lot of schools won't even know about their pregnancy and maternity policies and what it says in there, their adoption policies, their absence policies that often penalise women in a way that they don't penalise men if they don't have paid dependence leave, what their cover policies say, whether they have a workload policy, what their gender pay gap review says and is indicating. So those sort of boring paper policy documents that sit somewhere and nobody does anything about, potentially, actually getting a handle with them and saying, what are the outliers and what are the rules of being in this school when it comes to being a parent and a teacher, or a human being and a teacher, and are the working conditions that we're entitled to. And if any of those policy documents smack as unfair or exclusive in any way, start thinking about what you can do to change them.
I think you've given some amazingly useful advice, and obviously because you run your project, that advice is ongoing, which is brilliant. It's not something that you kind of just give advice and then you just leave alone. In that, which is great. I mean, I've given Jenny's number to a previous friend before that was wondering about like maternity, parental shared leave, and so I always know, like, I've got Jenny on the minds going like, she's an advocate for this, like, get her on the case.
And one thing I was going to say there, especially if any people that kind of run schools or institutions are listening, when you said, and I wrote it down because I thought we need to put this like as a quote in the show notes, when you were saying, if you are running a school and everyone can't get their job done in 8 to 5, that's a very simple test that you are not running a life-friendly school. And it's like, I think a lot of schools would not currently pass that test, which shows you they do need to look at their policies and they do need to look at how they're doing workload, because there is, for me, I think so much of it is this idea that, you didn't go into teaching for the money, it's a vocation, all these things that are just essentially shaming us into trying to work for free.
Yeah, it's the guilt. You definitely get guilted into things, feeling a certain type of way that you have to give your everything, your all the time in teaching. It's like, well, I am a human as well, like, and I do have like a life outside of teaching. Like, I am a teacher and I love being a teacher, but I mean, and we've said this in quite a few of our podcast episodes so far, Jenny, but there's like, to be a happy teacher, it's not just about being in a great school. Like, you also have to be happy outside of school, and like all of this stuff that we've been talking about makes you happier outside of school, which ultimately makes you happier inside of school when you're there. And so we always like to end off with get in the bin, which is Jenny's little phrase for something that we don't quite agree or we don't quite like and we feel like should need to be thrown away. And we asked you, Emma, to think of something that you'd like to get in the bin.
I was mulling between something enormous and something much more sort of trivial but impactful. I'll go with the trivial. Well, I want the motherhood penalty to get in the bin, but we need like at least 3 other episodes to talk through the motherhood penalty. But so my get in the bin is the phrase, enjoy those precious moments, often followed up by they won't last for long or time goes by so fast.
Oh yeah.
And I think I used to hate them when I was on leave. Firstly, because I was like, I don't enjoy every one of these precious moments. Actually, like, no, I don't enjoy being pooped on in a public place when I've got nothing, or vomited on the tube in rush hour when I've got nothing to do. No, I'm not enjoying this. It's not a precious moment for me. And that's sort of, again, that shaming and that guilting of parents to be like, you're not present or, having a precious enough time. And it's sort of in that narrative of, you chose this. So deal with every single thing with a smile on your face and don't complain, which is just not realistic. And I think as well that, followed up by time goes so fast. I know it goes fast. It's one of those phrases like, it's probably in the last place you left it when you've lost something. Like, yes, it probably is, isn't it?
It probably is. If I would have found it by now.
Because I think when you're thinking, God, time's going so fast, you're just panicking constantly about not being present enough or not enjoying the moment enough, rather than being like, this moment is so great. Last moment was also so great. Next moment also wonderful. So those two phrases. And I think also there's an implication or a sort of a pressure in enjoy these precious moments, because there are certain ways that society feels that you should be enjoying these precious moments. Don't worry about reading, just enjoy these precious moments, gazing and making eye contact with your baby, which is really important to make eye contact with your baby and do, call and response, with child development stuff. But also there's only so long in a day that you can gaze uninterruptedly at your baby at close range. So could I read a book for 10 minutes and enjoy that precious moment, or like put the baby down and enjoy an adult conversation for half an hour? Can I enjoy my precious moments like that? Can I enjoy my precious moments with my baby at a conference? Could I please organise a social change movement in terms of the way that we treat teachers and who become parents, whilst also with my baby, because I'm enjoying that precious moment and my baby is pretty happy as well because they're 3 weeks old and sleeping. So yeah, I am polite and I smile, but I grit my teeth when everybody says, "Oh, don't worry about it, just enjoy those precious moments." I am enjoying the damn precious moments.
Yeah, I love precious moments, but I also like to do other things as well. Like,
yeah.
And it's kind of like the thing what we're saying about, like, we are a teacher, but we are also lots of other things. It's the same with being a mother. Like, I am a mother, but I am also lots of other things. I'm not only a mother. I'm not just a mother. Like, I'm not just a teacher. So, it's like...
Roxy, what are you saying? That we can be 3-dimensional?
I know.
We're
madness.
Multifaceted being. Get out.
People say that, like, oh, but you're just a teacher, and it's like, oh God, like, like it's like, it's like the mother thing. Oh, you're a mother, but like all of these other things come afterwards. So yeah, you also find that I feel quite passionately about things too, like as well as Jenny.
Absolutely.
Heaven sometimes.
So I'm guessing when people say this, it might be kind of people at work as you're about to go off on your maternity leave, or maybe you've had a kit day or something. So we then also like to talk about what, schools or whatever institutions could do differently. So get in the bin, but then go for the win, which actually that was Emma that came up with the go for the win. So thank you, Emma. But what would you replace it with then? So the go for the win is you don't like that. What would you rather happen?
Open-ended questions.
Yeah.
What's going on with you right now?
Good. Yeah. That's like,
how's your maternity leave going?
It's
rather
so
than, are you having a lovely time? No.
Yeah, I don't want a closed question or a statement of like something. I just want an open-ended, like genuine interaction with somebody when I see them, like, you know, at whatever point. Oh my God, Emma, it's been so lovely speaking to you.
Thank you so much.
Honestly, oh, that was in unison, Jenny. Well done. It's like
we're just so connected, you know.
No, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been really lovely to meet you, myself, because obviously I've never met you before. Yeah, I'm really glad that you came. You're our very first guest, so I'm really happy to have you as our very first guest.
Yeah, thank you. And just to say as well, a lot of the things that Emma's been talking about. So obviously we'll have links to the MTPT project, also the kind of ambassador schools, and all those things will be in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Love a link.
Thanks, Emma.
No worries at all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.